Chapter Undefined, Chapter 1 over 0. This was written in 2018. This is January 27th, 2021, 6:14 a.m. And so I live with my aunt, just to give you an idea of how well I'm doing. Perfect fixer-upper project in case some lucky lady wants to play her cards right. But I live with my aunt, and sometimes I'll watch TV with her in the living room. And there's no cable at my aunt's either. We use the antenna. Remember the bunny ears on television sets in old television shows? Old cartoons? That's us. So it's pretty much a choice between PBS, MeTV, that's memorable entertainment television, and Decades, which channel, as implied by its name, Fear Viewing Pleasure, plays old programming relics from decades past. Like MeTV, it caters to the elderly and other weirdos and misfits and frugal freeloaders divorced of cable satellite who exist, who subsist somehow at the outer fringes of society without source or outlet to such paramount media as MTV, VH1, and Spike TV. I live with my aunt, though, and sometimes I watch TV with her in the living room. And so a couple weeks ago, I wake up sometime in the afternoon, and I emerge from the basement, and I put on some coffee, and as it brews, I pour a glass of milk, and I go sit in the living room where my aunt's watching TV. And so there I am, and we're sitting there, and Decades is on, and it's playing episodes of Card Sharks from like the mid-1980s, sometime before I was born. Remember Card Sharks? Maybe? Probably not. Well, it's like Family Feud. You know Family Feud. Al Borland, Jay Peterman, Steve Harvey. It's just like that. Family Feud. Except instead of families, its motif is a giant deck of playing cards. But contestants are still asked questions based on surveys of 100 people of some specific demographic. You know, like, we asked 100 morons if they were literate. What percentage of those what percentage of those had trouble understanding the question? Then one of the contestants guesses a percentage, and the other contestant chooses either higher or lower based on the other contestant's guess. Then survey says, and then something involving playing cards after that, blah blah blah. But so there we are, my aunt and I'm waiting for the coffee to brew, and we're watching Card Sharks from the mid-1980s, and there are two contestants, a man against a woman, and the woman has control of the board, and so she's asked the question in a survey of those employed in a managerial role within a Fortune 500 company. We asked 100 women, would you accept a promotion offering double your current salary if it also demanded that you relocate to a country where it's required that a woman wear full robe and head garment in public? What percentage of those women surveyed said that they would accept the promotion? And so the woman, she guesses 60%. 65, something like that. Then it's the guy's turn, some silver fox, and he has to decide whether more than or less than 60-something% of the women surveyed would accept the promotion. And so the guy, he's thinking, he's pondering, and he's about to make his guess, but before he does, he explains his logic, that, well, I think that most women today are just too vain not to dress sexy. And so he guesses 15%. Of course, illustrating just how out of touch the guy was, survey said like 85% of the women would accept the promotion. Something totally opposite Silver Fox's guess. Now, my aunt, this poor woman, born in 1962 to her father, a Harvard lawyer, World War II vet, a child during the 60s, grew up through the 70s, professional woman with the mid-80s and during the 90s. All the rebellious spirit of recent culture before her, throughout perhaps the worst time for women in the workplace since they were allowed in. Broad-burning feminist, though, through and through. For the longest time, of the opinion that marriage is another name for prostitution. So Silver Fox's rationale and how far off the survey said he was, this sets my aunt on some women's tirade, and of course she's toting the company line about typical male attitudes toward women in the workplace, misqualifying her assertiveness for bitchy, catty striving, her harnessing of her most appealing appearance unto a component of her strength, her vain, seductive, conniving. Besides, women not wanting to be treated like they're inferior, the yada yada yada. And about then, conveniently thereabout, enough coffee seemed hopefully to have brewed, and so I left my aunt to her roar, and yet it hit me, though, how relevant the scene is to the current cultural conversation, because it seems really tense right now between the sexes, doesn't it? How Hillary just lost to a grabber, allegedly, of women's pussies, though no one has come forward with actual accusations that the president wielded them like a bowling ball. And hashtag Me Too and debates again over abortion, that it just seems so divided, this current American coitus, right? Inflamed in too much conflict. So I'd like to, if I may, use this opportunity to perhaps illustrate something not neglected, but maybe lost to the current circumstance. In desperate attempt to restore some semblance of sense to the present situation, and bring to her consideration something that not my aunt, but whole womanity in her fury may have missed, and show not my aunt, but the grand sorority of femininity, how perhaps, just maybe, she's being right now a little too selfish. Because, you see, what she doesn't realize, women, is that it's not men that she's against, but only an era of men. She opposes the brotherhood of the baby boomers. But if she just waits a little longer for equality, if she'll linger below her glass ceiling for another 10 years or so, maybe even less, then all the boomers and their immediate protégés will be dead. Or at the very least out of the workplace. Then I think she'll crusade to more sympathy. But let me try to bridge the gap a bit until then, if I may. Not to absolve, but to put the predecessors in more proper frame. And perhaps then, you women, then you might be inclined towards a little more patience. Because my aunt, she was merely speaking to the standard sentiment, how women have been programmed to respond to how men like the Silver Fox were only capable of thinking. But really, I think women failed to give men enough credit for the breathtaking strides that he's made in but the short breadth of a century's evolution. Because, you really have to see the industrialization of the late 19th century and the early 20th century as the birth of our very workplace today. But which was conceived by parents who just, 30-some years prior had spent 500,000 lives to officially disallow a person's right to own another person and wield them like machinery. And so by World War I, though, while there's no slavery, yet there are still no rules to labor whatsoever. Huge disparity between production and management. If you, as worker, even whisper a word that sounds like unionization, or say too loudly in any context the word strike, you're liable to get your face bashed. And culturally, there's simply no compassion at all, because life before electricity was just shit. Just awful drudgery and painstaking, laborious, and tiresome swelter, dull, tedious boredom, smelly, tepid, just hot, right? Just a hot, sweaty, humid, stifling, overclothed, bored, smelly mess of a nightmarish existence. And everybody is like aggressively ugly. You ever see photos from the time of the Titanic? No woman looks like Prose. Every woman looks like the unsinkable Molly Brown. Every man is a greasy, grimacing ogre with grotesque, scraggly whiskers and a horrible breath. And man has only hateful contempt for his common man. And factory owners are all just cold, ruthless, mean-spirited miser robber barons without a tender care in the world or anything resembling pity. Every so often as you're standing there, probably working within literal hell, some meatpacking slaughterhouse, toiling through the bloody horror and misery of your own daily quota, and not far down the floor, you hear the boss firing some 7-year-old in front of his father coworker. Fast forward to the Great Depression, and everywhere you go, you're tripping over hobos because there is no work, and everything is dusty and awful until Roosevelt agrees to let Japan bomb Pearl Harbor, right, to get America into the war, but which pretty much established the military base as the model of the modern workplace. That military demeanor first shaped, then became the basis for workplace conduct thereafter, which was all male. So there's your grandpa's dad, right, trying to fuck your grandpa's mom before he ships out. They're sitting in the movie theater before the flick, watching the public service announcement of the grainy football footage and clips of national champions taking the lamest team photos ever. Everyone's standing in line to have their picture taken individually, doing the same Heisman pose, which is all just a clever lead-in to a cigarette ad. Then the cartoonish voice behind the fourth wall, now addressing the captain of the local high school team in stride as he exits the locker room. "Hey, Billy, good game. How are you going to celebrate your big win?" Then Billy, I'm going to share a black cow with my best girl down at the local soda jerk." "Hey, Billy, that's swell. Hey, where are you off to now, Billy?" Billy now has his arm around his best gal as they walk. "Me and this little lady are going to go enjoy a cigarette at Lookout Point." "All right, Billy, have fun. Say, Billy, what's your brand?" "Why, Winston-Salem, of course." "Of course. Hey, Billy, don't take no for an answer." "Well, I won't." "Attaboy, Billy. Well done. Winston-Salem for the bold." Smash cut to your grandpa's dad's deployment as he walks straight into the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan and instantly loses all semblance of civilization and moral order and a softer innocence. And somewhere between turning over his buddy's dead, faceless body in the sand and watching that guy walk around carrying his own severed arm, somewhere there, the part of your grandpa's dad that sat patiently through the public service announcement and then through the movie as he was trying to fuck your grandpa's mom, that part of him was lost to himself, never to return, dead in forever death, to resent henceforth on some level the citizenry safe back home, on whose behalf he had beheld such chaos and mayhem. Try to comprehend the hypermasculine subterfuge that it would take to suppress such carnage. Bury it way down deep. Divorce yourself of any vulnerable decency, lest you fall with the weak, and cleave only to the wild survival instinct, to then arrive home with knowledge with the knowledge and the proof that there is no civilization, that everything is Disneyland, and you and your buddies control all the rides. Try to appreciate, you ungrateful women, the restraint that your dad's grandpas all showed, and then try to contain, rather, your own standing ovation and your applause for the next miserable old man that you should see. That he went away and killed everything he knew about the world, then came back from war, dead to all prior notion, and yet still wore pants around the workplace. Nor either did he institute at every office the permanent employment of prostitutes, or even put a whore on every floor. Imagine the perspective of a generation of men, your grandpa's dads, and his brothers and his peers, all of them together, like a manager over his office just before the monthly staff meeting, standing there, his hands at his hips, in circumvent survey of his team, like a leader before his troops, savoring not just his personal position, but his place among their collective fraternal power over the scene in front of him and the locker room paradise firmly under their proprietary control. Like we're all still the implied spoils of victorious warfare. Like, this is it, boys. The vision of our daddy's fight and the fruition of our victory. Imagine the proud reverie that Edith interrupted and fucked off prematurely. And the patience then, which in the moment was mustered. The composure that your grandpa's dad maintained in keeping merely verbal his rebuttal to Edith and refrained from violence. Edith, who stormed not a single beachhead, who helped secure not a single strategic position. Edith, who had hardly the regard to allow the man to put away his cock after the monthly cock measurement of the exalted male had concluded, which, since long tradition, as we all know, had preceded and brought to order the monthly staff meeting of businesses and boys' club nationwide, before today that he's been detestified by Title IX. Edith, who barely observed the full breadth of the honored hush, which since from of old had all throughout culminated the revered ceremony, and who, Edith, after the solemn silence had passed, once the meeting officially commenced, with initial solicitations for any pertinent matters to be addressed, any new business, first and foremost, or concerns that were in need of immediate redress. Edith, who didn't even raise her hand, nor wait for the exalted male to call on her before already she had started bitching. Now, without question, it wasn't your grandpa's dad's finest moment. A brief lapse in control, perhaps caught up in the emotion of the moment. In fact, perhaps caught up in the emotion of the moment. In fact, if you asked him, I bet he's willing to admit by now, some 60 to 70 years later, that he regrets it. At the very least, that he would take no pleasure in doing it again the second time, even though Edith had already, for a while by then, become way too mouthy. For the longest time had been just asking for reprimand, and especially seeing as how her smart mouth insubordination was starting to rub off on Meredith. But still, like I said, not his best showing, your grandpa's dad's. He had certainly seen harder challenges before, and had harnessed heartier humor to handle them. Yet, how long shall primacy suffer impertinence before applying its place, to so procure a proper pedigree among its subsidiaries? Or if it were overreaction, should all impression be henceforth forfeit by a mere moment's loss of composure? For more times than not, he'd have answered Edith softly, even in response to such blatant affront to his authority, and so would have here too, but for the preeminent pith and lingering pomp of the unappeased obeisance of the venerated penis measurement, and for his delightful daydream, so abruptly by Edith dismissed, when before he even granted her the floor, so grabbing him by his balls in front of the whole office to begin the meeting, Edith less asked than demanded, then openly challenged the very prowess of her boss, your grandpa's dad, regarding his recent managerial decision. He had more reasonably rather kindly entreated Edith, appealing to those her relationships, which she esteemed and cherished. In his mind, I know it, his response was soft, spoken so light that with an almost whisper, not to impose, but a naked appeal, entreating, even begging Edith her pardon, that she please not take such things at all personal. Yet moment, though, maintains such measure still over the manners of even the most austere of men, and not least of all when put on blast by some broad who, mind you, killed not a single Nazi kraut, that the disciplined demeanor of your granddaddy's daddy, yea, of any man so crudely castrated, was inhibited to the instant by the wild instinct which since the war and heretofore he had so admirably suppressed. And instead, when Edith figuratively cupped her palm around his privy pair, his scrotum of an exalted male, which had just recently been on display, and took then to twisting his testicles in front of everybody like some crass spectacle, another obnoxious feminist protest rally, complaining about workload and promotions and hierarchy as though she knew anything about chain of command. And a couple of fingers on the fanny every now and then, which are only the gestures of endearment, and so that she knows that she's appreciated, and as though there weren't enough of it to pinch anyway. And as her tush obviously couldn't have been too sore over it, seeing as how she certainly did enough sitting on it still. And more so, as though she didn't feel flattered by it anyways, and she knows she likes it, and like she wouldn't miss it and start feeling insecure if they stopped, and as though she weren't asking for the attention anyhow, wearing those nifty little hoop skirts all the time around the office. Oh right, and lest we forget, as though there also weren't a good plenty of women out there who just jump at the opportunity to have it so well. Even so, his immediate inclination was kindly, your dad's grandpa, and touched with respect for her worthy rival, even tender toward the feminine spectrum and beauty of bold moxie. That even despite that Edith had so imposed on everyone such a bummer to begin the monthly meeting, so impetuously and bluntly blurted, before even the chance that she were ever granted the floor. How come I wasn't considered for the recent promotion when I already perform all the duties of the position and all your new manager ever does is pinch my fanny? In his mind, in a moment, his reaction was calm, even warm, even receptive to her emotion, her jaded reproach, like a father, because he knows better and because he says so. Unto a daughter, defiant against wisdom as yet beyond her. How that he had served with this man, his chosen candidate. He had lost both blood and brothers together with this man. That he trusted this man's judgment and perspective, for that he had once ago entrusted his life to it. And the man's into your grandpa's dad's vice versa. He had wanted not to force Edith to accept, but to help her to understand the irresistible, albeit disappointing, truth of the matter and of her own powerless position. But what his mind meant and what his shouting snarl said, well, the two sounded nothing alike. And what came out, unfortunately, instead, was more like, "Shut your mouth, Edith! You weren't there! You didn't watch Billy's face get blown off, that's why! Because we won the war, that's why! Because we beat the Nazis!" Now, I know. And like I said, not your dad's proudest portrayal. Given. But how about, before we judge this man, this grandpa's dad, this generation of all men alike, maybe let's explore the core of the emotions that went unexpressed in the words that weren't said. Maybe get us off our high horses, perhaps. Shall we? And let me here extend an olive branch and try to bridge a little this gap. And consider this, ladies, if you will, and see if you women still won't consider putting a lid on it, and knowing your place for another 10, 15 years tops. That I might give you life. I didn't pull out. That your mother might raise you right. I stuck around. Even when she was being a huge bitch, and there were tons of other broads and quieter who I could have been with. That I might defend you. I went away and watched my brothers die, but kept you safely away at home. That you might not be heartened by such carnage. I shed my blood to win for you the world. Not for me, don't you see? But for you ladies. That you might no longer be burdened by opinion or pursuit, or suffer any longer with thought or worry or responsibility. Because I'm Dad, and I know better. And I said so. And I decided such, and did as much for you. And all I wanted you was to love life, whiling away the idle hours, in pleasant repose, always the prettiest part of my scenery. I sacrificed lives by the many millions to win for you the victory, yet all the while would not suffer you to suffer such suffering, but kept you blind to my selfless purpose, like Santa's secret surprise, and that you need never either question or measure or weigh or wherever the cost at which had come your comfortable culture. It was all for you, don't you see? All the pain, all the mayhem, the death, destruction, and chaos, it was all for you. And all he ever wanted, ladies, in return, which in exchange for his great sacrifice, he felt it so obviously and undeniably implied unto his due that he never felt need to ever ask for it. It was for you to just stand there and look pretty. And gossip with your girlfriends, to make him a sandwich when he's hungry. To go grab him something refreshing when he's thirsty. Knit him a sweater when he's cold. Maybe take a little pride in how the house looks. To have dinner ready when he got home, and not to wonder where he was, or worry why it's so late. And for you to abide by, and fear, and respect, and obey his word like the unquestionable rule of law. That's it. That's literally it. That's all he ever wanted. But then, women, you had to go having opinions, and voices, and dreams of choice and equality, and autonomy, self-determination, and respect.